Hey everybody, it's Jeremy from the New Release Wall. Just got done watching The Lord of Misrule.
When we bring a child into this world, we vow to guide them through the darkness and lead them towards the light.
To the harvest!
To the harvest.
Cheers! Who do we call?
I don't know where Grace has got to.
Grace!
Grace!
Grace! It just came out. It's, what do you call it, a neo-pagan movies. It's very much like Midsummer. It's set in England, a small town, an outsider deacon woman is put in charge of a Catholic church, and her daughter goes missing, and she has to like figure out what's going on, try to get her daughter back. The way I have to rate this movie is I have to rate it as just okay. It had a lot that was good, but so much of my rating, so much of like whether or not I tell somebody that I can recommend a movie has to do with how it ties everything together. All the way up to the end, I would say 75% through the movie, I was on board. I was like, this could be a good movie because it had decent acting. It had that one guy in it that was in The Witch. The guy, he has like this amazing voice. I mean, this guy is perfect for that kind of movie. I mean, he is absolutely perfect. I forgot what his name was, and I probably should know it, but he's got this really super deep voice. He's a tall guy. Again, he was in The Witch. He's in this movie. He's like the main suspect, odd guy in the village that you're like, well, this guy has something to do with something. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Anyway, he's in the movie. The movie itself was good all the way up, but again, so much of how I rate a movie has to do with how they tie it all together. And when the tie came down, it just came untied. It didn't. It was like a performance where the person does a decent amount of, backflips and somersaults and twirls, and you're like, all right, this might be good, and then like they don't stick the landing. You know what I mean? That can make or break a movie, and in this case, it did. So if you just wanted a quick, review, synopsis, whatever, mine is, it was just okay. It wasn't terrible. In fact, you even might enjoy it. If you like kind of paganish, neo-pagan movies where they have like a pagan, you might like this movie, but I didn't, and I couldn't recommend it to anybody. Some people are comparing it to The Wicker Man, because after I get done watching the movie, I had to look it up and see if there was any like substance to the movie, like backstory, because some of it sounded like it could be like actual folklore, but I couldn't find much. The Lord of Misrule itself, like the lore of it was sort of a quasi worship of Saturn in the old, the old religion, Saturn. I don't know if I didn't know this until like recently, but like there was human sacrifice associated with Saturn. Some people liken Saturn to Molech, and Saturn is comparable to Kronos in Greek mythology, if I'm not mistaken, and it's also why we get the term Saturday. So there was this festival, and then it sounded kind of like, it was kind of like a cross between Mardi Gras and Halloween, where they would go door to door and beg, they would give a gift to get a couple gifts. And there was also a time when people were going around, they would choose a fool king, where this guy would be treated as a king for 30 days, and then he would slit his throat on an altar at the end of the 30 days. Not joking. That was part of the ritual, at least in Rome. Now I'm not talking about when in Christian Britain. In Christian Britain, it was more like Mardi Gras mixed with Halloween. The bishops hated it, but they were peasants are gonna peasant, and you know what I mean, they just allowed it, and then they'd have parties, and they were wild parties. Again, it's like Mardi Gras. There's some, the church didn't like it, but people would do it because it was fun. Anyway, that was the Lord of Misrule, but even though this says Lord of Misrule, and it has a full king. They mention a full king in the movie. It's really not, like, what do you call it? I don't know. All right, right here is where we start spoilers. So if you don't want to hear any spoilers, because I'm about to spoil some stuff, so you can tune out now. All right, this movie doesn't like really focus on the Lord of Misrule. It focuses on a demon that's basically a Wendigo. Like, I mean, that's what it is. Like, all right, and that was part of the problem with this movie. The problem with this movie, just like demon didn't make sense. Like the reason why the town, they tried to like make it to where like they were like, yeah, we used to worship this demon and like we would give him stuff and then he would like give us miracles. Then of course the church came in, the big bad church, and squashed it all. And apparently, at least in this story, the church took the leader of that cult and put a bag on his head and set it on fire. I guess they had to do something different than like the old, you know, the basic burn you at the stake. I don't know. All right, this is like, my problem isn't even all of this. My problem was, what did you get? What did you get? If the demon, like, if you're gonna like sacrifice your, like, cause that's how they made it out. Like in the end, it was like human sacrifice, and you're like, for what? I kept waiting for some. I'm like, okay, so what's the deal? If I'm gonna be giving up, because as they said in the beginning, it was kind of like I give some corn, I give some wheat, I give some blah blah, you know what I mean? And like they put in this barn for this like sacrifice for this entity, and I'm like, well, what do you get? What do you get? And then if you go all the way, which is like give them a kid, what do you get? I kept waiting for the what do you get? And it never said, it was like, oh, we're gonna do some miracles. It's, you know, it'd be cool. Like I never understood why like even people went along with it. Like it turned out the whole town was in on it. And I was like, you guys are gonna have to come up with a really good reason, like in the end, why this was a thing. Like why is everybody bought into this? I know there's cults that like will buy into some crazy stuff, but you normally can't get a whole town to do it. You know what I mean? And especially over a long period of time. There has to be normally a cult like that will like center around a particular cult of personality. Like a guy who just happens to have like super charisma, which in this case didn't. The guy who was like running the whole thing, he had gotten his kid got like 12 years ago. And then I guess he became when you get your kid got, you become the priest, which makes no sense. I mean, you'd be like, unless you gave up the kid willingly. If they just took your kid, you'd be pretty upset about that. You wouldn't be like, oh yeah, since you stole my kid and killed him in this weird ritual, I'm gonna be your man. I'm gonna be your priest. You know what I mean? That's dumb. It just don't make any sense. So I kept waiting for it to make sense. And then at the end, she finally gets to this barn, which was cool. Like the scenery, it had the black sun, which is shout out to Dark Souls. You can always win with a black sun. But like the reasoning behind why the black sun showed up was because normally a black sun is when the world is about to end. You know what I mean? Anyway, so they get to this barn, and the barn was cool because they had this like, I don't know, like a figure floating in front of the barn when its head was on fire. That was cool. The scenery was cool. And I was like, all right. And I even liked the fact that it was a barn, because in like religious terms, a barn is where you gather what's good. And is it like even in the Bible, it's when he talks about God gathering the good into his barn, but the chaff, in other words, the stuff that's nonsense, he will burn up with fire. You know what I mean? So if you get gathered into the barn, it's a good thing. So this was a black barn. So like this is where I guess the gathering of this particular demon. But still, like there had to be something good. Like in Midsummer, they were all like, what was great about Midsummer is they were all crazy, and even the people getting sacrificed, number one, willingly at least most of them willingly sacrificed it, and then they were like still having a sort of like an ecstasy, a weird psycho ecstasy as it was even going on. That's what made the movie so nuts. You were just like, at the end of it, you were like, what did I just watch? But this one wasn't like that. It was like the kid got kidnapped, and you went to get the kid. And then the kid didn't even seem like he wanted to like leave that bad. And you're like, all right, well, if the kid don't want to leave that bad, how come? Like, is it the kid getting it? Is there any good reason why anybody would want to do this or stick around, which they're making it out like a bunch of people wanted to do it and stick around and like, you know what I mean? And then finally, it was time to see what all the fuss was. They were gonna show us the glory of Magog or whatever that thing was. And it was just a giant Wendigo. And I mean, it was a cool Wendigo, I guess, but like it was still like, it just like kind of like walked in, not even growled, like just like knelt down and sniffed the girl. And then she took off with her kid. And she was like, oh yeah, since I stood up to him and like gave him some of my hair, I got to take my kid out of here. And then and of course that made the guy that was leading the whole thing mad, because he was like, man, you can't be taking your kid out. That's our sacrifice. And she's like, no, you couldn't do it, but I did it because you couldn't face him or something like that. It was weird. And then she was like, everybody kill him. And then the whole town turns on him. And so she takes his place for what? And then like, they were like, yeah. And I kind of got like, they wanted to show like a priest or priestess or whatever, like it's a whole nother topic, but getting converted, like before the church took over this cult. Now the cult took one of theirs, you know, they got one of them back. They took a priest, you know what I mean? And it was like, what? Again, everything that fell apart at the end, because you were like, man, all right, this might, you know, and the imagery was awesome. They had these awesome masks. They looked authentically, I don't know, old school pagan or whatever, if you want to call it that. All of that was great. I loved the town. I loved the casting. It was just the reasoning behind it all. They needed something. They needed some sort of like, you know what I mean? Like, there has to be a real temptation. That's why in the old myths, you didn't just like become obsessed with the devil and be like, hey, I'm gonna follow you for. I mean, you had to like sign the contract for something. You got something from it, you know, power or influence or money, something. I kept waiting. Well, what is the like, or at least, because they kind of made it like he was gonna show us miracles. All right, well, at least let's see some of these miracles. Let's see some of the fireworks. I mean, if you're gonna sacrifice your kid, it better be a real good fireworks show. You know what I mean? Anyway, sorry. So that was my take on it. And again, I think for me, when they're trying to do this pagan stuff, you have to be real careful with this, man. I mean, real careful. Number one, trying to mix Christianity and the pagan, like butt them against each other. One of the problems is the 21st century mentality comes out a lot. Like there's like a lot of people nowadays that are like kind of like they see Christianity as having taken over the pagan, and then they're kind of salty about that, right? And like it comes out in the film, and then it like that ruins it. You're just like, oh, you made it against pagan versus Christianity, which in the old way, it like Christianity took over paganism. It was more like a I don't know, it was a more natural. There were the idea, anyway, like it wasn't, the 21st century just came out too much. Like, and then like in the end, she was still being a priest in a Catholic church for some reason. And then you could see that she was really not, she was really undercover because her nails painted dark and they were long. So you knew she wasn't really about this whole Christianity thing. I don't know, it just stunk of like the new witchy thing, you know what I mean? Where people are like, I'm a witch because I really hate how religious my parents were. How Christian religious my parents were, you know what I mean? It was like that. It was like, you feel that. And you don't feel like, there's certain films where you didn't feel that at all. Like you didn't feel that in Midsummer. You didn't feel that in The Witch. If you wanted to do like Christian and pagan ideas together, The Witch was perfect. But this was, it didn't have the heart. It didn't have, or even the intellect. Like, all right, if you don't have that feeling that The Witch did, all right, well, at least make it make sense. At least like show us that like the town gets wheat made of gold or something like that when they do this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Or they win the giant pumpkin contest. This thing makes their pumpkins all grow really, really super big. Something. There was nothing. Not even a fireworks show. I was just like, anyway, so that's my take on it. That's my rant. It was just okay for me. But if you want to go ahead and take a shot, like, again, I don't regret watching it. I couldn't recommend it to anybody. I think there was another, if you want to watch a good Wendigo old school movie, there's another one called The Ritual. That's one worth watching. That's one that's worth watching. The Ritual. Skip Lord of Misrule. I'd actually love to see Lord of Misrule represented the way that it was on Wikipedia when I looked up to see if any of this had any like actual historical substance. And they're talking about that, well, they made a guy into a king for 30 days and then cut his throat at the end. Do that movie. That's it for me, guys. Visit us at the New Release Wall. Please like and subscribe. And see you in the next one.